So, how did I manage 548 letters? I promise you, when I looked at just how many there were, that's why it took me 8 years from the point I finished it, finished digitizing them, to actually looking at how to publish a book about them, because that's a lot of letters. And I knew that just publishing a book with letter after letter after letter would not be all that interesting, really. Maybe to family it might be interesting to see all of them in one spot, but I wanted to come up with something else, and I just didn't know how I wanted to go about doing that. So, in the end, with the advent of technology, Claude helped me. That's the AI tool that I used. Um, just before I go too much further, I also want to tell you I had another batch of letters, and those letters I got in the 90s, in 1995 roughly. I typed every single one of those letters because I don't even think a speech to text software even existed at the time. Now, all those letters, I want to do something with them too, and make a book out of them, and I'll probably use Claude. Because this process that I'm talking about works pretty good. Um, and so AI becomes your research assistant, your assistant in helping to make sense out of all of those letters. So here's what I did. Claude read all the letters, drafted entries for a letter log that we kept in an Excel file, and waited for me to approve before anything got written to that spreadsheet. So every single row in that master log was drafted by the AI assistant, but approved by me. So today I'm going to walk through what that workflow looked like and the exact prompt I used. And there were mistakes along the way. So it's not perfect, but I'm describing what my process ended up being after iterations of this, etc. And so if you're thinking about using AI on your own family archive of documents, uh, and I think more of you will than would want to admit it, this is the view of what I wish someone had given me before I started. So I'm Julie Bonner, and this series of videos is covering how I handled 548 letters written between my paternal grandparents in World War II. So essentially, the process at a high level was I had all the digitized letters. I had the AI tool. I gave it a prompt. We built an Excel log, and I would load batches of letters along with the log. It would give me summaries and its assessment of whether the letter should go in the book or just save it. And then we just did that over and over and over again. It took several weeks to get that done. So every working session, so let's go into some of the details now. So every working session began with the same kind of prompt. And one of the things I've learned about Claude, and is probably true about other AI tools, that chat session box, there's only so much you can do with it. It sort of runs out of processing at some point. So I had to open another chat, work through more letters, and eventually it ran out of processing. And I don't know if that's just a limit of AI. I don't know. I eventually upgraded my subscription level, um, but it still ran out of space or processing abilities in just a single chat. I have learned from this experience that if you're working on a big project like this, start a project. And I'll get as into why a little bit later. But so I'd open a chat and I would put in this prompt. Now, this prompt I've also copied and pasted into the description of this episode, so feel free to use it, mark it up however you want. It's just free information for you. So I told it, I am working on a book of letters between my grandparents during World War II. I'm going to upload a master log and a batch of transcribed letters. Please read each letter and propose a row for the log. The columns are the letter file name, the date, the author, written from, written to, key quotes, emotional tone, historical details, family details, and recommendation of either book or ancestry, notes, and war timeline context. State the book or ancestry recommendation in chat with the full source file name before writing anything to the spreadsheet. Wait for my explicit approval before appending. Make honest book or ancestry calls. Do not sell or oversell weak letters. So that's what I would type into each chat. That last line, do not oversell weak letters, turned out to be a very important sentence in the whole prompt. AI tools tend to flatter you a lot and flatter source material. And without that constraint, every letter would have been called book. The discipline of the project was finding the letters that were actually book worthy and rejecting the rest. So that's how I was using AI to do this. Then I would put the Excel log and I would upload 5 to 10 letters. I found 5 to 10 to be kind of the sweet spot for me. And at least for Claude, you can't do any more than 20 anyway. But I found 20 to be a lot to read through and everything. So I kept it to 5 to 10. And so I would update the log. The Excel file would grow every session, plus a batch of these letters. And by the end of the project, the master log, the Excel log, had been uploaded and resaved hundreds of times, each session built on the last. The Excel file is the only memory that exists between the chats. Thus, sometimes Claude would forget a rule that we had agreed to, et cetera, et cetera. So that's why I propose that you actually start with a project rather than just a chat, because it will remember more. In fact, when I work on the next batch of letters for a book, that's probably what I'm going to do. Okay. So that is the loop. You upload, draft, approve, append, save, and then repeat that process. And again, this took several weeks. So Claude didn't just read the letters and silently fill in the spreadsheet. Claude read each letter and in the chat, a draft of what the row would say. It looks something like this. It would say letter 156. The date is November 22nd, 1945. Author is Woodrow, written from Osaka, Japan. Written to Reform, Alabama. Key quotes, a sentence and another sentence, there'd be 2 or 3 maybe. Emotional tone was categorized, and the recommendation. Book or excerpt or save off into some other archive. Okay. Then it would make references to topics in the letter, and then it would give the source file name. So that source file was named 1945-November-22-W for Woodrow, which was my grandfather. And I would read it and I would say one of 3 things. Yes, append, or change the tone, or change something about the entry, or this is Ancestry, not the book. Once I approved, Claude would then append, save the file, and present the updated worksheet for me to download. Then we'd move to the next set of letters. Now, one big mistake I noticed early on was we weren't saving the file name. And if I'm going to sort these letters, I need to have that reference. So you know how I told you one of these letters was named 1945-November-22-W. So if Claude had suggested and I agreed that it should go into Ancestry instead of being in the book, I wanted to go ahead and pull that one out. Okay, so having the file name in the Excel file was a big deal. So we actually had to stop at one point in time and force it to go back and redo some of the entries. Because we had, I don't know, maybe 50-ish letters in the log before I realized it. And I was like, we got to go back and revise those entries so that the file name is on each and every one. Now, since I was working in one chat, that worked out okay, because it had all the letters to reference back to in the chat. Um, and so it fixed that. So what I did is I stopped, I uploaded the log, and I typed something close to this because you have to give these AI tools sometimes directives. And so I stated, I need the exact file name of every letter recorded in the source file column. We have to add this column and we have to backfill it for every existing entry. Please remember this for every batch going forward. I cannot match book or ancestry decisions back to specific files without it. So it backfilled. It took one of the sessions. It was tedious, but the lesson was the lesson. Claude is only as good as the prompt sometimes. You have to watch what it's doing. You have to read the output that it gives back to you. And sometimes it's like, oh, we didn't think of this. And then you have to stop and revise your instructions. There would be other kinds of corrections. I won't go into all the details of what they were because a lot of them were fairly insignificant, but probably the bigger one was the fact that a lot of these instructions and a lot of the learning that it would do in one chat didn't always follow through to the next chat when I had to open another one. Thus, why I think a project is a good idea. So this is really about having a working process and that you have a prompt that you save off in like a Word file or something like that, that you can copy and paste back into a new chat or remind it of the instructions that it's been given. Because I swear sometimes it seems like it forgets. So just be aware. And so I want to be fair as well because Claude did some things really well. Claude is patient. I mean, it's a computer program, right? So it could read a letter, it could pull things out. It gave me information and Claude never grew tired. I was the one that grew tired, you know, uh, working on this for a few hours in a day. I'd have to stop. Claude could have kept going, but me, no. Also, Claude flagged some inconsistencies. Um, so there was a letter where my grandfather had written a sales figure of a number, and then a later letter corrected it to a different number. So it flagged those kinds of things. Also, Claude was really good, and it really helped in writing the final manuscript, which I'll talk about that in another video, but it did a really good job of pulling out threads through these letters. If I were reading these one by one myself, it would have taken me much longer to pull out these threads of these letters. It would have been, just reading them would have been very hard to do. And I knew that. I have a doctorate using a qualitative style in my research, and I knew from that, trying to make meaning out of words. After a while, you're like, I don't even know what I'm reading anymore. So, the whole process of using AI to find these themes or find these stories that are connected through the letters was extremely useful. Okay. So save your opening prompt as a Word document, paste it at the top of every new chat if you use individual chats. The tool does not remember. It very often doesn't remember all the details of between chats, of what you've agreed to, etc. Upload your transcribed letters in batches. Keep them fairly small because you'll have to read through the output and go, yep, that makes sense to me. I agree with that, whatever, or make changes to it. Always upload the current master log at the start of every session. That is the memory of the project in terms of all of the documents. Approve the batch and have those added, and then you save the file again and repeat the process. Okay. Save your work after every session, download that updated Excel file, back it up, and do not skip the source file column. In the next episode, I want to come back to the writing itself, and talk about that process and kind of how it all came together through each of these phases that I'm talking about. And if you have your own family archive of documents of any kind and have been wondering whether AI tools could help you, yes, they can. I will also, in a future video, talk about how I handled the AI questions with KDP, the publishing platform where I published Loose Pearls. You can also find a link to the book in the description, as well as the prompts that I've mentioned in this video. And so, by all means, I hope you are not afraid to use AI. But I did find that I did have to get a paid subscription in order to make this go a little faster, because sometimes the free tool or the free portion of it would take longer if you've got a big project like this. So I had to free up some processing on the tool to make it work. So subscribe to so that the next episode shows up. And if you haven't read Loose Pearls yet, the link is in the description. A paperback and hardcover will be coming, but the Kindle book and the audiobook are already published. Thank you for being here, and I'll talk to you soon.